You're listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.
Welcome to the Mammal Watching podcast with me, Charles Foley in Minneapolis.
And me, John Hall in New York. Good to see you, Charles. I hear you've been reading all about golden jackals.
Yes, I have indeed. So I found an interesting paper about golden jackals and how they've been spreading across Europe. So as many of our listeners probably know, the golden jackal was formerly considered a single species across its range, but it's now been split into two species. So you have the Asian/European species, which retains the name golden jackal, which is Canis aureus, and you have the African species, which is now called either the African golden wolf or simply the African wolf, Canis lupasta. And I have to admit, the African golden wolf that you see on the plains of the Serengeti is very small and looks nothing like any of the northern wolves, but that's the current taxonomic thinking. So the golden jackal has a very broad range and was originally found all the way from Vietnam through India to Eastern Europe, like Hungary, Croatia, etc. However, since the late 1960s and 70s, it's been expanding its range towards the west and north of Europe. And this is probably partly because people have stopped shooting and poisoning it. And this expansion increased significantly in the 1980s, and they started showing up in new countries like Switzerland, Poland, and Germany, where they're probably still mostly vagrants, but increasingly becoming native. And in early 2016, a golden jackal was camera trapped in the Netherlands, and there have been several records from Denmark, and at least one record from Haute-Savoie in France. And in the north of Europe, golden jackals have now crossed the Arctic Circle and reached the Barents Sea in northern Norway and also northern Finland. But perhaps most remarkable of all, in 2023, so last year, a golden jackal was killed on a road in northern Spain. So it had actually crossed the Pyrenees. And there are probably a number of reasons for its expansion, including changing climate, which leads to more suitable habitat for the species, and their strong adaptation to a human-dominated environment, and possibly also the historical decline of the grey wolf, which would traditionally predate on golden jackals. And what's interesting is that in many ways, the spread of the golden jackal mirrors that of the raccoon dog across Europe. And that, of course, is an Asian species that was introduced into Europe in Russia and has now spread widely. And it is now also common in Poland and Germany and has occasionally been seen in Denmark and Holland. And there's even a record from southern Spain, although I don't know, that record sounds more like an escapee to me, but clearly it's expanding. So anyway, mammal watchers in Europe, you should keep your eyes open as there appear to be various interesting carnivores heading your way. And hearing golden jackals howling at night is a common sound in some rural parts of India. In fact, it reminds me very much of the howling of coyotes here in Minnesota. And I wonder how long it'll be before people in, let's say, Holland or France or Spain start hearing that sound as well. So anyway, it's a nice story.
Very cool. Yeah, it is a nice story. Another successful European carnivore story. They seem to be doing pretty well in lots of places in Europe. Is there any discussion in the paper about any negative impacts they're having on the rest of the ecosystem?
No, not at all. They seem to slide under the radar a little bit and perhaps fulfill some of the niches that red fox fulfill in human areas. So yeah, there was nothing in the paper over there mentioning that. What's interesting is actually that when I said, the wolves would predate on golden jackals, what they find is that they can actually overlap peacefully. So a bit like, I guess, wolves and coyotes. They sort of seem to reach a truce, or the golden jackals in areas where there are wolves, they're just a little bit more leery, etc. But yeah, no, they're clearly expanding rapidly, and I imagine eventually will probably cover the whole of Europe.
Wow, very interesting. Very cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Today, we are going to talk about jaguars and jaguar tourism because, frankly, it's quite a remarkable story. Now, as many of you probably know, 25 years ago, jaguars were virtually impossible to see in the wild, let alone photograph. Indeed, there was a National Geographic article on jaguars that was published in 2001, and despite all their funding and contacts, their photographer was only able to get 2 handheld pictures of jaguars in the wild, and both of those were at night. And yet today, you can visit the Pantanal and see multiple jaguars, and if you're lucky, some interesting behavior like hunting or mating. In fact, sightings are now so predictable that some tour groups have started guaranteeing jaguar sightings, or they'll give you your money back. And today we're going to discuss how we got to this point, what changed on the ground, and what this means for local communities and landowners, for local businesses, and of course, for the jaguars themselves. And to talk about this, our guest today is Fernando Tortato, the Brazil Conservation Program Coordinator for Panthera, the global wildcat conservation organization. Fernando graduated as a biologist in 2008 and joined Panthera in April 2009 as a field researcher working with jaguars on 2 cattle ranches in the northern Pantanal. His master's degree looked at jaguar predation on cattle and produced an economic assessment of the damage caused by jaguars in cattle herds in the Pantanal. In April 2018, Fernando completed his PhD, where he examined the economics of jaguar conservation in the Pantanal, mainly assessing the role of ecotourism. Fernando has contributed dozens of articles on jaguar ecology and conservation in the Pantanal and is currently co-supervising master's and doctoral students on topics related to jaguar tourism as citizen science, governance, and economic valuation. Fernando, welcome to the podcast. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thanks, Charles. Thank John for the invitation. For me, it would be a pleasure to be part of this podcast.
Thank you, Fernando. It's really great to meet you. Looking forward to the next hour or so. Could you start by telling us how you first got interested in wildlife?
Well, I become interested in wildlife since I was a child, 5 years old, when my parents moved to Southern Pantanal, to Porto Murtinho. It's a city located outside of Paraguay River. And during our weekends there and our activities there, it's only related to nature, like take a boat to go fishing and see birds, bird watching. And my mom was she really enjoyed to be in the nature. And since I was a kid, my father and my mom always give to me books related to wildlife and nature. And I grew up with this vision of this passion with the nature, and I never have any doubt about my future as a biologist, as a conservationist. And never in my mind I think about to be a lawyer or an engineer. It's something out of my plans, and that's, I think it's the big difference.
Yeah. And now you work for Panthera, which is a conservation organization that specializes on cats. How did you make the jump from a small boy in the Pantanal, loving wildlife, to becoming a professional biologist and conservationist?
Well, I did my graduation in southern Brazil, in Santa Catarina state. And always when I have some opportunity, I take some days as like an internship in some organizations in the Pantanal. And I didn't take any, during my graduation, I didn't take any holidays for me, for like going to the beach or enjoy. I just take this time to be a volunteer in different projects and initiatives in the Pantanal. And with that, I get a lot of knowledge and experience with different researchers that are working in the Pantanal at that time. And when I finished my graduation, I received some invitations to work as a biologist in the Pantanal. First in a small NGO, and to work with jaguars in a very remote range, and try to understand why have a lot of depredations there, and why the cattle there was so impacted by jaguar predation. And I almost spent the entire year there living at the ranch and getting a lot of experience about this interface between cattle ranching and jaguar conservation. And there, some researchers from Panthera know me, and they visit the project. And after a year, they invited me to start work with Panthera. It's 15 years ago. And in the Pantera, I start as a field technician, doing a lot of field work, transects, setting camera traps, capturing jaguars, and after some time, I think, well, I need to grow up and start make my master's degree, and I did my master's degree with this issue about conflict, try to understand the impact of cattle predation by jaguar and the economical impact of that. And on my PhD, I try to understand the another side of this economical impact of the jaguar in the Pantanal. We know very well the impact provoked by the damage, that is a historical process. But as Charles explained in the beginning, we now have this industry of the jaguar tourism, and when the jaguar become something very important for the economic of the region. And during my PhD, I tried to understand both sides, and it was very interesting to understand how the ecotourism can be a tool for jaguar conservation. I think that's my main contribution for my PhD. And I keep working as a researcher at Pantera. Now I'm working more with bureaucratic issues and not, I do not stay too much time in the field like in the past years, but it's part of the process. But I'm very happy to develop this kind of work in the past 10 years. And I think when I remember all the steps and everything, it's a very nice history.
Yeah, Fernando, I have to admit, it happens to everyone. Anyone who's good in the field ultimately gets taken out, gets made to be an administrator, a bureaucrat, and you spend most of your time writing reports and raising money so that other people can go and have fun in the field. So yes, I'm with you on that one. But okay, so you have done a lot of research on the jaguars in the Pantanal. So can you explain to us how and why the Pantanal became the place to go to see jaguars?
Yes, that's a very common question that, and it's not easy to answer because have different aspects. For an ecological perspective, it's that the Pantanal have a high productivity habitat, and with that, we have the highest density of jaguars. In the Pantanal, we have around 8 to 10 jaguars every 100 square kilometers in some regions. With that, we have more jaguars per area in the Pantanal than Amazon or Central America or any other place. We have more jaguars in a small area comparing with another place. Another aspect is the landscape in the Pantanal. It's more open habitat, savanna kind of habitat. Along the rivers, we have these river banks, and the riparian forest, it's very narrow that concentrate a lot of prey outside of the rivers. The habitat component, it's also important. And also the Pantanal have a land issue that we have big range in the Pantanal. We have this properties with 10,000 hectares, 50,000 hectares, where it's possible to coexist some economic activities and also the preservation of the maintenance of biodiversity. Pantanal have 300 years of its history of cattle ranching, but they still have more than 80% of the native vegetation. And with that, it's a good example of coexistence where the jaguar can coexist with the economic use of the landscape. The main activity there in the Pantanal is cattle ranching, and cattle ranching create a conflict with jaguars. And in the past, or let's say 30 years ago, if you talk with some ranchers there and ask and say to them, well, in the future, we will have a jaguar tourism here, he will laugh and say, no, you are joking with me. Because in that time, every jaguar in a range was persecuted or killed by cowboys and ranchers because it's a threat for the herd. And we still have jaguars in that time, but the jaguars are far away from the habituated jaguar that we have now. But after the 80s, when the Pantanal have a big flood, when many ranchers abandoned their properties, and also on the 80s, we have the environmental movement in the Brazil that decree of creation of a national park, ecological station. We have some NGOs working in the region, creating private reserves on the 90s. We have some different factors that create a perfect scenario where we do not have more conflict. We have a lot of NGOs and protected areas around. And year by year, the Jaguars that at beginning just start to be habituated because they associate the boats with fish. Because in the beginning, the fishermen was there. They stopped their boats outside of the river and they clean when they get some fish. They sometimes leave some dead fish in the riverbanks, and the Jaguars start to be habituated with this. And like 25 years ago, some tour operators saw that they said, "Whoa, that's an opportunity," and start to come to the region every year. And these few Jaguars 25 years ago become habituated, but the next year have a new cubs that become habituated, and generation after generation we increase the number of Jaguar habituated. And now we have more than 100 Jaguars habituated in this region, Porto Jofre region, that is in northern Pantanal. And with that, we have this ecological factor, we have this habitat condition, we have this economic influence of the economical crisis of cattle ranching also benefit the Jaguar tourists now, and create this scenario where it's almost guaranteed that if you go there now, like we are in September, you can see many Jaguars. It's very common to listen people say, I was there just 3 days and saw 10 Jaguars. It's something very common now. But like you say, 20 years ago, it's almost impossible. And it's a very interesting process and was increasing in another regions of the Pantanal, but Porto Jofre is still the best place in the world to see Jaguars. It's amazing how this changed in the past year. I started work there 15 years ago, and it's totally different now. That time, it's very rare to stay like more than 10 minutes with a Jaguar. You can see the Jaguar, but after some minutes, you just enter in the forest and it's done. But now you can stay hours and you can choose, I want to see a female with a cub. We know that this region have a female with a cub. Let's wait there and have a look. And we know that in some moment, we will see a female with a cub. Or let's see Jaguar hunting. I know that I have another male that it's hunting that region. Let's go there and have a communication system between the tour operators by radio. And all these aspects make this industry a huge success.
And do you know how huge a success it is in terms of numbers? Because I went in 2007, I think, probably just before you arrived, and I don't remember seeing any other tourists in Porto Jofre. I was on a little boat. I think we were out for maybe 2 days and we saw 3 Jaguars and it was wonderful. And but now I've seen pictures. It really looks like it's big business. So do you have the figures on people or how much money they bring in?
Well, I did my PhD and I get in data in 2015. From that year, considering 7 lodges that work specifically with Jaguar tourism, it's around almost $7 million per year. But we know that the industry grew a lot since then, in the past 10 years. Now we have more than maybe 15 lodges working in the region. And the number of tourists, probably it's double that we have in that moment. And we can say that now it's at least $10 million per year or maybe more. Because it's a place that do not have too many beds. With that, we have a limitation of number of tourists. We estimate around 15 to 20,000 tourists per year. It's not too much. We have some national parks in Brazil or in the United States that we have this number of visitors per week. But it's a very specific tourism. And I think the best example how the Jaguar become a product. It's something that started in 2018 that they call here Jaguar Express. That it's some tour operators that are they are based in lodges 150 kilometers from Porto Jofre, but they can guarantee the Jaguar observation. And they wake up like 5 a.m. with their tourists, take a van, arrive in Porto Jofre around 9 a.m., go to the river, have the lunch in the river, return like 2 3 p.m., and all the tourists are very happy and with a lot of pictures of jaguars and everything. That it's something that it's very clear for any wildlife observation. When you can guarantee and convince a tourist that you took a van, wake up like 4 a.m.,
Yeah.
do not eat any breakfast, and you can guarantee a jaguar observation. It's something very magic. It's something that started, let's say, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And from one side, it's good. For another side, it's a problem because sometimes the place that have some jaguar have, it's overcrowded, like many boats, many noise, but still have a good experience because us, we have not just one or two jaguars, but let's say 5 6 jaguars. The boats divide in different groups, and with that, we have a good experience for everyone.
Wow. Jaguar Express, I love it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the tour operators, I think the guide and the tour operator, they have a very important role in this because in this region of the Pantanal, it's a open access system. It's a state park, but do not have like any entry fee, do not have any state control of this. Everyone that arrive at Porto Jofre and put their boats in the water can have access to the jaguars. With that, the role of the tour operators to control that and to set some rules and like a minimal distance about the noise, it's crucial. And that's, I think, is a key factor for the success for jaguar tourism in Porto Jofre. How the private companies and the tour operators manage the activity.
Right. Yeah, we'll sort of like maybe touch on that in a little bit, but I wanted to ask, how has this explosion of jaguar tourism affected the sort of local communities and the people in the local region? What do they make of it?
Well, in the region, in the past, we have most ranchers and cowboys and the ribeirinhos, that the people that live riverside and the communities along the river, basically fishermen. And the jaguar tours bring opportunity to them because to be a boat driver, to see the jaguar, you need to have some experience to see the jaguar in the middle of the vegetation. And with that, most of the boat drivers, most of the tour guides, they are locals. And we have a high demand for boat drivers and tour and guides. And with that, it's good to see that most of the income that comes to this region stay in the region with locals. We have many examples, for example, from people that now they have a lodge, and in the past they start as a boat driver, and now they build a career and make some contacts, and now have a very interesting history about how the jaguars changed their lives. And for the community also, they still work as a fisherman during the from January to June, that it's not the high season for jaguar tourists, but they know that how jaguar it's important from them, for their business, for their lives. And I think that's the big challenge, that some companies goes to the region, explore the region, but do not interact or do not provide the same conditions or the same opportunities for the locals. In this case, in the Pantanal, we have at least 3 or 4 lodges that it's from the locals, that they start since the beginning, since for zero, and now they have like their own company and a lot of profit with jaguar tourists. It's a good example. And now in the past year, we have some companies from Europe, from Africa, that they start to work together, but still have a very local base.
And I remember having discussions with you previously, and you say that there's still jaguar conflict in some of the ranches around the area, right? So there's if you've got cattle ranches, the jaguars will still go to those ranches and maybe kill cows. How much conflict is there, and has the perception of that changed? Are some of those ranchers perhaps less inclined to shoot jaguars because of that now? Is there some sort of peer pressure because so many people have jobs with jaguars, or do those ranchers still really dislike jaguars?
Yeah. The conflict with ranchers is still the main threat for jaguars in the Pantanal. We need to be clear that jaguar tourism maybe cover 5 to 10% of the Pantanal. The 90% of the Pantanal is still cattle ranching landscape. And if we look in the jaguar distribution for the Pantanal, it's around 60% of the Pantanal still have jaguar populations. The conflict, it's the main issue that we need to deal to. And on this region that we have jaguar tourism, we create like a landscape of tolerance. I can say coexistence, but I think tolerance it's better because the ranchers, they know about the activity, they know about their neighbors that are getting funds profit with jaguar tourism, and they manage to reduce their bad perception about jaguar. They try to understand, okay, I know that it's important for the economy, the local economy, and we are always working together with them, trying to convince them to reduce the vulnerability of the cattle for jaguar predation. Like some ranges around this region, we have electric fence in the paddocks. We are always listen the rangers and also explain to them new techniques and how they can manage their cattle to reduce the cattle predation by jaguar. It's something that we need to work together. The tourism, it's a fantastic tool for conservation, but most of the rangers, they do not want to work with tourism for their personal decision. I just want to keep my tradition as a cattle rancher, and since my grandfather make this, and I do not want to be involved with this economic activity, but he's open to listen to us and understand that it's important for the region, and they are reducing their conflict with the jaguars. It's something interesting that from one side we are increasing this landscape of tolerance, but one good impact of that, we are increasing the jaguar population. And with that, it's very common to listen that, wow, I do not have jaguars in my land 30 years ago, and now I need to deal with this problem. And we increase the area that we have conflict now, and we need to manage to work with these ranchers. It's a constant process. And it's not just in the Pantanal, it's in Patagonia with pumas, and maybe in Europe with wolves. When you have success from one predatory species start to increase their population, also increase the conflict in different areas. But it's part of the game, and I think we need to learn a lot. And I think this interaction with the rancher, it's very important. Listen to them, because usually they say, no, the government just imposed these rules to us, or the jaguar tourist industry imposed these conditions to us, but they are not paying our bills. They are not covering our expenses related to jaguar predation, and compensation scheme. It's a little bit complex to apply. From one side, it's hard to convince the tour operators to give some donation to compensate the damage. And the perception of damage, it's totally different. Like the ranger, he say, no, I have a huge damage. But when you look on the ground, the real data, it's not too big, because he always put some cattle heads more than the reality. And the tour operators do not want to pay to them, because they consider, no, they are a big rancher, rich person. No, makes sense for me, a small tour operator, give a donation to them. And we need to manage, and I think the best solution that I found, it's interact the two activities, like put one rancher to talk with a tour operator, and they together create a systems to work in their land, like offer some safaris, or so, not just about jaguars, but maybe in that range, it's easy to see tapirs or giant armadillos or giant anteater, another species. And with that, this rancher start to receive some benefits from the tourists. He do not work or do not create any lodge inside his land, but he allow it the lodges around to explore the area and have some safaris. It's a good example, and I think it's an opportunity that we have a lot of space to grow in the Pantanal on this system. In the southern Pantanal, it's very common. We have many ranches there with ecotourism inside that they sell this Jaguar tourism or wildlife tourism there integrated with the cattle ranching.
Yeah, that's an interesting scenario because then it's basically the Jaguar tourism is in effect taking place on private land. It's their land, they manage it, they get the profits from it. When did that start? Was that something that happened only recently, or has that been going on for a while now?
No, in the southern Pantanal, we have some ranch that start Jaguar tourism more than 20 years ago. Of course, that in that time, it's not like so easy to see a Jaguar than now. Some ranches in the southern Pantanal, they also guarantee the Jaguar observation. And some of these ranch work with research that they set in the GPS collars on the Jaguars and show the Jaguar with GPS collar, have different examples. But now I know that at least 5 to 10 ranches work with Jaguar tourists in the Pantanal, southern Pantanal and northern Pantanal. And it's a pathway that when the rangers start this business, it's very hard to stop this and like, oh no, I do not want to work with this, because it's very clear to them that they will receive a lot of benefits from this. It's interesting because some rangers say, no, I do not want to work with Jaguar tourists because I have some cattle. They have some resistance because it's a cultural factor. They had conflict with Jaguars during 300 years, and now someone say, no, let's work with Jaguar tourists. It's something that demands some time to convince, and maybe the next generation will work better with this, but it's something that we need to be patient and always work together with them. It's very funny because when they start to work with tourists and have some benefits from the Jaguar observation, they say, well, Fernando, it's amazing. All the benefits that I receive from Jaguars cover more than 10 times more the damage that the Jaguar provoked. But I had some problem with my neighbor that do not work with tourists. And I tried to convince him to start to work also, because in this land have a nice landscape and maybe have some future there. And they start to work together. And I think it's like a movement between them. It's much more easy when a rancher convinces another rancher than a biologist like me try to convince a rancher. And I think that's the nice issue about this history. And it's the same with the anti-predation techniques, because they are always managing their cattle since their father did, and not just release the cattle in the native grassland and few times in a month have a look in the cattle. It's Pantanal is a very extensive management. They have few activities like daily activities with the cattle. With that, create a perfect scenario for the Jaguars that are moving around and predate some cattle, because do not have anyone there to control this. And when we start to apply some techniques like electric fence, in the beginning they say, no, it's impossible in the Pantanal. No way, Fernando. I will not lose my time with this. It's very funny. Like this guy that told this to me 10 years ago, now he's the best rancher in the region that work with electric fence and show to everyone that visit his range, look this paddock with electric fence, it's working very well because I put just the calves here in a specific time of the year and reduce a lot the predation, because during the first months of this calf, the vulnerability is so high that it makes sense for me to put the cattle here. And after that, I release the cattle in like the traditional way, but with that, I have much more profit. That is something interesting to see, that they are learning, and it's a slow process, but everything integrated with the tourists, because Jaguar tourists put the Jaguar in the media. Jaguar tourists put the Jaguar in the TV, in the newspapers. Like you say, 20 years ago, it's almost impossible to have good pictures from Jaguars in the field. When I was a child, and the TV shows, National Geographic, Discovery Channel, I just saw documentaries about lions, tigers, cheetah. I never have the opportunity as a child to see a documentary about jaguars. Now we have many in Porto Jofre, I know at least more than 10 documentaries from different countries about Jaguars, from Japan to UK to United States. And now we have this Jaguar image in the world, and that's a benefit because some of the locals, they are very proud of that. They say, no, that's my Jaguar. This Jaguar is from this region, it's from my city. It's something new. I have some videos on YouTube that have more than 1 million views about Jaguars. Oh, then everyone share in the local contest, like WhatsApp groups, always are sharing these videos from Jaguar hunting a capybara, or how beautiful it's the Jaguar. It's something that it's something new for Brazil. Maybe in other countries we have this link with the wildlife more clear, but now we are building this in the Pantanal. It's very, very nice to see this.
Certainly for a number of years, when you arrived at Kilimanjaro International Airport in Tanzania, that's like the hub for people going on safari, there was a big screen and they have wildlife on it. And one of the main videos was actually of a jaguar catching a caiman. I think that someone got it confused with a leopard, perhaps trying to catch a crocodile. But anyway, I always found that a bit amusing. So going back to that National Geographic article, they interviewed one of the ranchers over there, and the ranch manager, he himself had shot over 70 jaguars over his lifetime, right? Does any of that still happen now, or is there just either like legal issues or just general pride in the area that has changed that philosophy, so people will now be far more likely to let the jaguars live?
I think it's a very rare now, this kind of behavior, because 20 years ago or 30 years ago is still a very like macho culture, like I'm the best jaguar hunter in the Pantanal. It's something that the people that in that time they have a lot of proud of that. Now I solved the problem of my range because I kill all the jaguars. It's something that they do not have any fear to talk openly to everyone. Now it's totally different. If someone say, "No, I kill 70 jaguar," it's like through social media, it's like a disaster for his life or for the entire family. And now we have a new generation. We have much more access to information. And a very interesting point that I always talk with the ranger, it's when they start to talk about jaguars and the problems that the jaguars bring to his range, that it's killing too much cattle and he needs some solution. And he sometimes they are very angry, say, Fernando, I do not want to work with tourists. Maybe I will kill all these jaguars because I do not have more patience for that. And I say, well, what your son or your daughter think about this? And no, please, Fernando, they cannot say that, know that, because they hate when I talk about this with them. It's very clear this difference between generations. And another issue is that in the Pantanal, it's maybe one of the few places in the world that the jaguar population grow. And we have more jaguars now than 30 years ago when George Haller and Peter Crawford start to work with jaguars. Because in that time, we have more conflict with the ranchers, and we have the fur trade that kill hundreds of and thousands of jaguars in the Pantanal. And it's a good example. It's George Haller when he started to work here in Brazil and it goes to the Pantanal to search a place to start to work with jaguars. It's very hard for him to find a place with a stable population and start his project. Peter Crawford, the Brazilian biologist that worked with George, he did his master with caimans because do not have jaguar enough to make his research. And that's a good example. At the same place that now we have this magic place of jaguar tours, Porto Jofre, and we can see many jaguars, the density of jaguars there, it's high. And that it's an issue with the ranchers because their grandfather do not have this conflict that they had now, but they understand the importance of jaguar tourism and the jaguar is growing, the population. And I always say, well, your grandfather do not have success to control the Jaguar population. Your father do not have success to control this Jaguar population. You need to understand how to manage your land with Jaguars, because Jaguar is part of the Pantanal. You cannot think about Pantanal without Jaguar, without all this wildlife here. And I think it's important for you to understand how you can manage your activity, economic activity, with the Jaguars. And they try to understand that, because the Pantanal, as we have this overlap, the place that have economic use, like native grassland, with jaguar habitats and the wildlife in general, it's a little bit different than if you compare with Amazon, for example. In a ranch in Amazon, it's very clear. The owner deforestate a portion of the land, and this area will be the area for economic purpose. The other area will be the legal reserve, the forest, and have this difference very clear. This is the space for cattle, there is the space for wildlife. In the Pantanal, we do not have this difference. The jaguar is it's everywhere. Sometimes the jaguars are walking around the headquarters of a range. And with that, we always reinforce that with the rangers. You need to understand that, you need to manage and then understand your land, how will be the best way to manage your cattle to reduce this vulnerability. Sometimes it's the place. Sometimes he's putting his cattle too close to the river, and it's a perfect place for jaguars. If you put the adults, like the bulls and the cattle more older, in this region, we will reduce a lot the predation, and put the calves and the youngest next to the house will reduce this kind of acknowledgement. Always we are asking to them the questions about his land, but also providing support for his business solutions.
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed the stories about how the ranchers learn from each other, more than from the biologists. And I was thinking you were talking about jaguar habituation, how the cubs, there are more and more jaguars now through successive generations. And it's almost the same process in reverse, in that you're habituating ranchers to jaguars. And you said this earlier, you talked about the local tour operators organizing informal, I think, rules to manage the ethics of the tourism. How is that working? And is that something they've done themselves, and is it voluntary?
Pantera started to work with Jaguar tourism in 2011. And the reason was that in 2011, the state of Mato Grosso, they create a decree, a resolution that brings some rules about jaguar observation. The decision of the state of Mato Grosso to create these rules, it's because we have a jaguar attack in a fisherman in that year. In that time, we have some tour operators and some fishermen that are baiting the jaguar with fish, and the jaguar become habituated on this process. And in that case, the jaguar jumped in the boat because the jaguar saw the fish in the boat and tried to catch the fish, but unfortunately attack a young tourist, and create a lot of media coverage and pressure. And after that, the state decided to create these rules, and was a very top-down process, when they do not ask for the tour operators and tour guides about what's the best. And with that, the tour operators, in the first reaction, they are totally against this rule, because now we are not part of this. This rule is not good for us. And I took the opportunity, because Pantera, as an NGO, it's a neutral organization. We are not government, and we are not related to the tour operators. And with that, I started to set some workshops and meetings between them. And I tried to show to the tour operators that how important was regularization of the activity. Have some like rules that they do not agree, but most of the rules they agree, like the distance between the boat and the jaguar, it's 10 meters. And they say, no, 10 meters it's too short. Let's create another rule that can be 25 meters or 20 meters. Because with that, the jaguar behave better, do not stay too close. And if you have a good lens, it's perfect. This distance it's perfect. With that, they start to adapt this resolution. And after these rules be set by the state, they have some reference, like some tour guide saw another one making some bad behavior that he said, hey, you are wrong because we have this rule as a reference. Before that, they do not have any reference. They cannot say, you are wrong, but wrong based on what? And after that, they start to create their own self-regulation. Like it's a small group. Let's say now it's around 40 boats. Most of them know each other. They have some relatives working together, have some social norm that I do not want to be the bad guy in the group and behave in a that will create a bad situation for others. And another aspect that also a benefit for this condition is that for Jaguar tourists in Porto Jofre, the options to be observed, it's always with the Jaguar, because the observation occurs along the rivers. The Jaguar was sitting on the riverbank, sleeping most of the time. They're resting or sometimes hunting, but most of the time they're just there relaxing outside of the water. And if have too many boats, too many noise, and too many stress for the Jaguar just walk 3 meters into the forest, and it's over.
Mm.
And that's the issue that is crucial. If one boat have too much noise, will create problems to everyone. With that, they try to convince everyone about the distance, about the noise, about everything. Because if the Jaguar enter in the forest, you cannot keep tracking and following the Jaguar because it's impossible because you are in a boat. That create this sustainable condition for the Jaguar observation. Of course, that in some place, like in small channels, have too many boats, it's overcrowded, creates some bad situations. But usually in the rivers, we have still have a good conditions where everyone respect the distance. We have a good behavior with everyone, and they are always like trying to convince everyone to be correct and manage in a good way. When someone start work in the region, they try to train him and talk with him. Like this year, they are promoting another workshop at the end of the year to work together, to discuss together the problem that they saw during this year and what they can improve for the next year. That's something that they're trying to manage by themselves, because the state, it's not yet the organization that take control of that. And maybe in the future, the state can assume that and work together. But for now, it's more a private initiative, and it's working well.
It's great.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. I know you've written about the Puma tourism in the vicinity of Torres del Paine in Chile. And are there many similarities between how the Jaguar and the Puma-based tourism developed?
Yes, I had the opportunity in 2018 to develop a project in the ranch around Torres del Paine, and it was amazing. Have some difference, like there, it's the Puma tourist, it's walking with the Pumas. You walk and climb some a mountain and see the Pumas very close, and it's a very interesting system that the guides wake up very early, goes high in the mountain and see the guanacos, and the guanacos have their alarm call, and with that you can see where is the Puma and see the Puma. And now the Pumas are so habituated, and the tour guide, they know very well their routines, that they know where each Puma will be in that day. And it's as they are working this every day, they keep tracking the Jaguar, the Puma, sorry. And it's very interesting, and they can guarantee the Puma observation there. It's amazing, but have a lot of similarities about the relation with the ranchers and the top predator there, the Puma. The same claims that I listened in the Pantanal, I listened there in Chile, and have this strong cultural factor with cattle ranching there also. And there also the Puma tourism start to grow after a natural disaster that is the Terremoto Blanco that occurs in 95, where some ranches around the national park stopped to work with sheep farming and open some opportunities with ecotourism there, and with that create this opportunity for Puma observation.
Hold on, what was the link with the earthquake? How did that affect the farmers?
It's no, it's not a earthquake. It's a snowstorm, Terremoto Blanco.
Oh, Terremoto Blanco, okay.
Yeah, the name is like earthquake quake in English,
right.
but it's a huge snowstorm that killed most of the herds of sheep herds there, and some of farmers they cannot recover very well their economic activity with sheep farming, and they decide to work with ecotourism in their lands because they are just outside of a national park that it's very famous for trekking and another nature tourist activities. But they still have this strong link with sheep farming. It's very interesting to see that they are totally open to work with tourists. Most of the lodges are inside these lodges, these farms, and have a lot of tourists there. It's a big industry. Torre del Paine. It's a fantastic industry for nature tourism and wildlife tourism. But they still persist with this idea to keep this traditional with sheep farming. And I had a very interesting interview with old ranchers there. When I talked with him, he explained to me how much his income from tourism, and he make a deal with a lodge, a very fancy lodge that built the lodge inside his property, and just pay him every month a lot of money, much more than his best scenario with sheep farming. He said, no, if I keep my traditional use, I will have this profit. But now I just sit here and just wait, and I have this profit. But for me, and he's almost 8 years old, he said, for me, it's very hard. And I say, why? Because I'm here in this veranda, looking the landscape, and I see this Zorro, the fox, walking around, and I cannot do anything. I cannot persecute this because I born and I grew up looking this fox as a problem, and now I need to be quiet here and just look the fox walking around in front of me. I will finish this content. I will not die with this condition. Like for him, it's like a conflict, and it's very funny to listen to that. It's not an economic issue; it's a cultural issue, and of course, that his daughter just laugh and say, "No, it's my dad, my father. He's crazy." And his daughter, he don't care about the fox. But for him, that grow up, that learn that fox is a problem, it's hard to manage this. And it's the same in the Pantanal. We need to be patient. We cannot push too much on this way, and I think we need to have patience. And it's a way that we know that it's a success in Patagonia and in the Pantanal, the Jaguar tours, the Puma tours, and year by year we can establish a good relation with the ranchers and integrate them with the economic activity, the Jaguar tours and the Puma tours. And I think it's something that now it's much more anthropological science than ecological science. I receive much more students that work with social science than ecological science. But it's interesting because we are bringing this new knowledge to conservation arena, and I think it's interesting.
That is absolutely fascinating to listen to that, because so often people I know and work with, I'm an economist, everything's about economics and it's about dollars, when of course it makes sense for him not to shoot the fox, but there's a whole lot of other things at play, like you say. So it's really interesting to listen to this.
Yeah.
As a last question, you've spent 18 years in Cuiabá. What's your favorite Jaguar experience, if you had to pick one?
Yeah, I have this privilege to have many face-to-face encounters with Jaguars, not just by boat, but during the first years there as a field technician, I worked on a motorbike or ATV and have many encounters with jaguars, or walking in a trail and having encounters with jaguars, and it's always a fantastic experience. Jaguar, they are like ghosts in the forest. Sometimes they are there, and just a minute or a second, it's not there, and you cannot see them. And when they show up to us, it's like they are giving this opportunity to us to see them, to observe them in the wild. I think for me, the experience that I had more intense, it's when I have like a mock attack. We are in the headquarters of a ranch, and some of the employees of the ranch saw jaguars walking in the road, like 200 meters from the house. And I said, whoa, it's a Saturday, like 2 p.m. And I'm not wearing any field clothes. It's just normal clothes. Let's go there with the camera. It's 200 meters from the house. It's close. And I was walking in the Jaguar direction, and I didn't see it. I just saw the female more in front. And when I enter in a small patch of forest, I have a encounter with a male, like 30 meters from him. And he's very angry, and they are mating, and he's very jealous from the female. And I just stop and froze and be quiet there. And this male start to walk in the direction of the female. And I say, well, okay. I start to relax. Okay, he just go and take his way, and it's not a threat. But after some seconds, some domestic buffaloes that we had at this ranch saw the jaguars and started to run in the direction of this couple, the female and the male. The female just ran to the forest, but the male turned around and looked to us very angry and just start to run in my direction, like showing his teeth and his paws, and like very fast, like in few seconds, from 100 meters, he's stopped 10 meters from me. I almost die. I have this sensation of like a prey, like I can't do anything. I do not run. That is the basic rule for this kind of situation, but it's very intense. And like 10 meters from me, he just stopped, make like that, this is noise, like, get out of here, and jump to the forest. I almost die and like shake my body for hours after that. But I think that's the most intense encounter with jaguars.
You're telling me it's intense. Wow. It's on the edge of my seat just listening. Fernando, what a fascinating story that you know from all these different angles. Charles and I are increasingly interested about the benefits that mammal watching tourism can bring to conservation. And I think the jaguar story is the jewel in the crown of this. And it's fascinating for us to listen to it from all these different angles. You described the landscape of tolerance that you are building or helping to build across the Pantanal. But it's also, I think, a landscape of hope. Hope not just for the Pantanal, but if this can work there, let's see where else it can work, because it can do so much good when people benefit, the animals benefit. It takes time. It's not just about money, but there is real potential here. And thanks to people like you, I'm hoping the world can learn more about this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as a conservationist, hope is crucial. We do not survive without hope, and we need to have this as a mode for our life.
Yeah. Well, and I completely second what John said. It's absolutely fascinating, and it's just such a great story, in that you've been able to, in effect, measure what's happened right from the start of when tourism started to kick in to now, and document the changes that are happening socially within the local communities, and what's happening with the jaguar populations, and also document the pressures that lots of tourism does bring onto an ecosystem. So I think absolutely fascinating research, and thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much to have the opportunity to share this, and for me it's always it's a pleasure to tell this, and it's if you have more 1 hour, I have 1 hour more of histories about all the other aspects that the Jaguar tourists bring in. Everyone that are listening this podcast, please take a opportunity to visit the Pantanal and see the Jaguar in the wild. It's a fantastic.
You've been listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and John Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.